And welcome to Venruki's Frost Mage Legion Guide. If you're watching this guide, it's most likely because you want to become a better Frost Mage and wield the great staff of Ebb and Chill. To start off this guide, we're going to be going over a few different things. First, we'll be going over the race. Then we'll be talking about talents, PvP talents, how to do effective damage, how to get out your crowd control, proper defensive play, macros, and add-ons that I find useful. So to start things off, let's talk a little bit about the races that I recommend for Alliance. If you're going to be playing Alliance Mage, I think Human is by far the best. You get an extra stun break with the Human Spirit stun trinket. So every 2 minutes you get a break on whatever stun you want. It pairs really nicely with adaptation. You also get an increase in haste, critical strike, mastery, and versatility, which is really nice. So a little bit of extra damage as well. You can get some value out of Dwarf, Night Elf, Gnome, Draenei, and Worgen. Maybe not Panda, just ignore Panda. But if you truly want to min-max on your Alliance, I would go Human. For Horde, I highly recommend Orc. Not only do you get a little bit of a reduction in stuns on you, which is nice, but you also get the increased damage from Blood Fury. So when you want to do that big burst with your Ice form, you can use that Blood Fury as well to get even bigger Frostbolts and Glacial Spikes. If you really don't like Orc, Blood Elf is another good option, as you get the Silence, which is super nice. And then, yeah, you can get a little bit of value out of Undead, Tauren, Troll, and Goblin, but I don't recommend them. Orc and Human, as well as Blood Elf, are my favorite options. So I am an Orc, and let's get this guide underway, now that you've made your brand new Mage. First things first, you need to spec yourself. Obviously, there's new talents this expansion. Let's quickly go over which ones I think are the best. In the 15 row, Bone Chilling is by far and away the best in my opinion. A lot of people ask me about Lonely Winter. I think having a water elemental is really important. Not only does it provide a little bit of extra damage when you're interrupted or when you're being trained, but having that Pet Nova to get off big Glacial Spikes and big Frostbolts with the Deep Shatter talent is really important. So Bone Chilling is what I usually choose. You can also select Ray of Frost, not a bad talent at all. You can use it when people are line of sighting, and if you have your Ice form up with Frozen Core, as well as Blood Fury, it can do a lot of damage. One thing I wanted to test is playing with an Enhancement Shaman with that Bloodlust, making Ray of Frost even that more powerful. So that is an option as well, but mostly I spec Bone Chilling. Level 30, the only option is Shimmer. The other two, yeah, I don't want to talk about them because I feel like Shimmer is so necessary for the Mage playstyle this expansion. Being able to blink cast Polymorphs, blink cast Glacial Spikes, blink cast Frostbolts, and not only just have 2 blinks is so important to the Mage playstyle right now, especially because we no longer have Deep Freeze to set up those Polymorphs. So having positioning advantage with Shimmer, as well as a later talent we'll talk about, Ice Flows, is really important. 45 talent tree. Incantress Flow is the one I select. It's just a little bit of extra damage. Rune of Power, not really that great because you have to stand still, and mages right now are so much about mobility. Mirror Images, perhaps a talent you could take in dueling, but I normally don't select it. The 60 talents, you have Ice Nova, Frozen Touch, and Splitting Ice. In PvP, Ice Nova is by far the best. Like I talked about, shattering those Frostbolts with Deep Shatter and Novas, including Ice Nova, is really important. So Ice Nova is a big part of your burst and consistent damage kit, so that's why you spec it. So you can Frostbolt Ice Nova to shatter it, or Glacial Spike Ice Nova to shatter it as well. The next row we have 75. There is some options here. Ice Flow is something I've been experimenting with more recently, and once I spec'd it, I basically always spec it now. It's really good. Not only being able to run cast your big damage with Frostbolt and Glacial Spike, so it's easy to chase people down around pillars. It's also nice for getting off those polymorphs, so not only can you use Blink Sheeps, you can also use Run Cast Blink Sheeps, and it makes it that much harder for a healer to avoid you. That's what I'm talking about. You don't have Deep Freeze anymore to set up those Deep Sheep combos, but you have big advantages with your mobility and being able to run cast. So Ice Flows is really good. It takes a little while to get used to, but once you do, it's well worth it. The only time I select Ring of Frost is when I'm fighting against a Resto Druid. If I'm playing with a Paladin or I'm playing with a Rogue, they can set up those stuns for me. A lot of the times Resto Druids just can't bear form, so it's hard to get Polymorphs on them. If they get Hodged or stunned in bear form, you can use a Ring of Frost on that, so definitely an option as well, but it's not something you have to select. 90 talents. I normally play Arctic Gale. just because I don't like CC breaking my polymorphs. So Frostbomb, don't take in PvP. For the most part, never in arena. At least I never select it. Unstable Magic gives you a little bit of extra damage on your Frostbolt. 20% damage for your Frostbolt to AoE, an additional 50% damage to all targets within 8 yards. So depending on your strategy and what you want to do, you can select Unstable Magic if you want to just turret damage, or maybe you just want to train a healer. Unstable Magic can work. The reason I like Arctic Gale, even though you don't normally use Blizzard, it can be okay for getting people out of stealth, but mostly I just select it so my Frostbolt doesn't break my AoE, which I think is really nice. So you can choose between Unstable Magic and Arctic Gale, and stuff like RBGs. Unstable Magic's probably better. Actually, maybe Blizzard's nice as well. That's besides the point. Those are the two uses of those talents. Level 100, Glacial Spike is one of the things that makes Frost Mages work right now. It's a huge amount of burst, although unfortunately it is a long cast and there is a little bit of setup. Once you do get that setup, it can just win you the game. So really important talent right now. Comet Storm doesn't do enough damage to be worth it. Thermal Void, obviously not worth it as well, as normally you don't even play Icy Veins, you play Frozen Core, or so you play Ice Form, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So yeah, Glacial Spike, really important. We'll talk about this more later. Moving forward, now we will talk about honor talents. We already went over talents. We're going to go over honor talents. I'm trying to go through these relatively quick. The first row, you have a trinket. You have adaptation, which is your auto trinket on a 60-second cooldown, triggering only on a CC that's 5 seconds or longer. And then you have relentless. Most of the time, I just play relentless, as it reduces all CC on you and allows you to play the game the most, especially against heavy CC comps. Adaptation can be nice against some classes like warriors, for example, when they use that physical fear on you, especially at the beginning of the game. You don't want to fall behind too hard, so having that adaptation to just quickly get out of it is nice. In mage mirrors as well, adaptation can be good, but yeah, it is situational, and I recommend experimenting between relentless and adaptation. I don't think one is always better than the other. I don't normally select the Gladiator's Medallion, but it's not bad. If you want to have full control over when you trinket, it's still an option. All three are options. Just experiment and see which ones you like, depending on what comp you're playing and what matchup you're playing. Row number 2, you have Train of Thought, Initiation, and Mind Quickness. I pretty much always play Mind Quickness. Helps you get off faster Frostbolts, faster Polymorphs, faster Glacial Spikes, and just playing with more haste feels better as a caster, so I pretty much always select that. You can get some value out of Initiation, especially in like if you're playing like RBGs, for example. If you want to do big swaps on people with Glacial Spikes, having it always crit with Initiation can be okay, but I never really play it. Then next, we have Netherwind Armor. Burning Determination is Prismatic Cloak. Don't ever really play Netherwind Armor. Burning Determination is really nice. Gives you immunity to interrupts. So say I cast a Frostbolt and I get interrupted. Now I'm immune to interrupts for 8 seconds. So it's particularly useful for getting off polymorphs. So if you get interrupted on a Frostbolt, you can then use you can use polymorph with Shimmer, and then later on, once the frost interrupt ends, you can use that ice flow as well, and it's basically on an interruptible polymorph. On the other side of things, if you get interrupted on polymorph, then you can really punish the team by popping your ice form and getting off those big frost bolts as well as a glacial spike. So Burning Determination, key for mage gameplay right now. Prismatic Close is nice, especially in a mage mirror, just for blink casting polymorphs or blinking polymorphs. So if you see the enemy team trying to CC you with those polymorphs or try to get big damage like Glacial Spike, it can be really nice as an offensive tool to avoid CC, as well as a defensive tool to avoid that big damage. But most of the time I play Burning Determination. Next row, Temporal Shield, Dense Ice, and Kleptomania. Kleptomania was something we saw a lot of mages play against Resto Druids, especially when it was a 15-second CD. Now that this is a 30-second CD, and most mages are realizing how good Temporal Shield is defensively, it can absolutely save your life every 45 seconds if you're being trained. Most people opt to primarily play Temporal Shield, myself included. It's very rare I'll play Kleptomania. Maybe when we're training down a Resto Druid, and he's like camping bear form and he just overgrows himself, you can get a lot of value out of it that way. It also can be decent in mage versus mage mirrors a little bit, especially if they have a Resto Druid on their team. You can Kleptomania off all their hots. You just have to make sure that they don't steal it back with Kleptomania. So there's a little bit of a mind game there. But yeah, Temporal Shield is something I probably play in most games just because of how good it is defensively. It's a 45-second cooldown, lasts 4 seconds. All damage you take during that 4 seconds will then be healed up at the end. If it gets dispelled halfway through, you'll get half of the value. So the 2 seconds you are attacked, you'll get healed back, or you can take it off. So the situation where you'd want to take it off is, let's say you use Temporal Shield at 100% HP, and in those 4 seconds you actually get bursted down into like almost death range. Then you can use a macro or click it off. I highly recommend using a cancel or a macro, and you'll get healed back for all of that HP. Next up, we have Chill to the Bone, Frostbite, and Deep Shatter. The only real option is Deep Shatter. The other two don't do anything, and Deep Shatter is really good for your consistent damage as well as your burst. It makes it so when you Frostbolt, it deals 200% additional damage to frozen targets. So using Frostbolt with a Frost Nova, Frostbolt with an Ice Nova, Frostbolt with a Pet Nova, Frostbolt with a Flurry proc, it makes it do 200% additional damage. Moving forward, we have Ice Form, this row we have Ice Form. The other two aren't real options either. Concentrated Coolness doesn't do enough damage, Burst of Cold doesn't do enough damage, and Ice Form is incredibly good. 1 minute cooldown increases your damage, increases the damage of your Frostbolt by 30%, and grants you immunity to stuns and knockback effects that last 12 seconds. Particularly strong against teams that don't have Dispel. If they do have Dispel, you can still try to squeak in some Frostbolts. One of the main reasons this talent is so good is the way it synergizes with Chill to the Core. So Chill to the Core is after activating Icy Veins, you encase yourself in ice, increasing your frost damage by 20%. That actually works with Ice Form. So instead of having that 3-minute Icy Veins Frozen Core, you have a 1-minute Ice Form plus Frozen Core. So every 1 minute, you're becoming immune to stuns, immune to knockbacks, doing 30% increased Frostbolt damage, and just 20% increased overall damage. It's exceptionally good, and it's key to Frost Mage gameplay right now. These two talents are imperative. Alright, so now we've talked about talents a little bit. I just want to show you guys how you basically do your consistent damage as a mage. It heavily revolves around Deep Shatter, like we talked about, Ice Form, and your Glacial Spike. So just normal damage, if you need to cast, is just like Frostbolt, Pet Nova, Frostbolt, Ice Nova, and you can Frostbolt, Blink, Nova, and shatter it that way. Also, if you're at a far enough range, you can use Brain Freeze to shatter a Frostbolt, and it'll actually shatter the Frostbolt as well. But you have to be at a further enough range. The reason for that is the Flurry has a faster travel time than Frostbolt, so if you're too close, it won't actually catch up to the Frostbolt and hit first, but if you're further enough away, it'll go past the Frostbolt, and you can shatter off of it. So that's like your consistent damage. What you want to be doing constantly also is thinking about how big your Glacial Spikes are going to be. The biggest possible Glacial Spikes you can be, or you can get, is with a pleb Glacial Spike first, is what I like to call it. So you want to have as many shattered Frostbolts as possible, and one of the best ways to do that is to just actually spam out a Glacial Spike. And with that Glacial Spike, you can Frostbolt into it, and then you can obviously do what we just talked about. You can Frostbolt Ice Nova, you can Frostbolt Pet Nova, and you can Frostbolt Frost Nova. And now we have the biggest Glacial Spike you can probably possibly get. The only way you can get it bigger is if you use your Ice Form and cooldowns to build up those shatters to get bigger icicles. But now, we'll wait for our Ice Nova. We have those 5 icicles stored up. And this is when you're going to want to use like your Ice Form, and this is how you get those huge Glacial Spikes. I'll show you. There's a Glacial Spike right here. You're going to Ice Nova it to get the burst off, and they're hit for 1.3 million. And then you can shatter off of that, and you just one-shot them. We got a 643,000 Frostbolt. Damage isn't exactly how it is in Arena. It's a little bit less, I believe, or it's a little bit more outside of Arena, but you can still tell it's a tremendous amount of damage. And that's what you want to be working towards. You want to be working towards getting up those big Glacial Spikes with those shattered Frostbolts, and that is how you do your consistent damage. Obviously, you're going to be able to use Ebon Bolt as well. If you get interrupted on a Frostbolt, you can use your Ebon Bolt. Using Frozen Orb is a decent amount of damage, but other than that, it's just a lot of Frostbolts and a lot of Glacial Spikes. So that's talking about damage a little bit. Now we are also going to talk about crowd control. This expansion, we no longer have Deep Freeze, so a big part of our crowd control is just Polymorph, Snares, and Novas, kind of going back to traditional Burning Crusade playstyle. That being said, we now have a few cool tricks. We have Ice Flows, so you can run cast when you activate it. So you can use Run Cast as well. We talked about you have Shimmer, so you can blink cast polymorphs. Another thing that's really good to take advantage of is that Burning Determination we talked about a little bit about earlier. So when you get interrupted on like a Frostbolt, you are immune to interrupts, so you can get those polymorphs off with that and crazy mobility coming up from Ice Flows as well as Blink. So Hansel is going to interrupt me. Let's just play far away. He's going to interrupt me on this Frostbolt. I'm immune now with Burning Determination, as you can see. And now we can like blink cast polymorph if he's at a pillar, and there's not really much he can stop us. In addition to that, let's say he's pillaring even more. Let's say the bird is a pillar. You can get that polymorph, blink cast, and actually run cast it as well. So you can keep run casting, chasing healers behind the pillar. Kona Colding them before you go for those as well is really good. So getting up that physical snare from Kona Cold, and then you can run cast the poly and they can't really escape. So using Ice Flows, using Shimmer, using snares as well as roots to get polymorphs is basically how you CC. Another thing to really pay attention to is Novas. Novas are really strong for your damage. So like we talked about, getting those Deep Shatter Frostbolts is a huge part of your consistent damage. Another thing about Novas is it's also an incredible crowd control. So if you polymorph like a warrior and he gets dispelled out of it, you can then just put him in a full Frost Nova and then leave him and go like chase down another DPS or chase down the healer if that's your strategy. You can even follow it up with another Nova if you want, but every time you make a decision like that, you're limiting your damage, so just keep that in mind. The thing I wanted to quickly talk about was defense as a mage. A large part of a mage's defense is crowd control, so making sure you're still rotating through your polymorphs on a target. Kiting with Kona Cold. Kona Cold is actually a physical snare now. It's a 70% snare for 5 seconds. So if you have melee on you, using that Cone of Cold effectively is really important. Using your Novas if you have to defensively. And then, of course, keeping up that ice barrier. To me, it's important, especially when playing against someone that has an offensive dispel, like an enhancement shaman, to use ice barrier as damage is happening, not preemptively. So you can put it up at the start of the game, but when you have like an enhancement shaman hitting you and whacking on you, it's a lot better to use it at that moment instead of like blink ice barriering, unless it's a very critical moment. You don't want him to get as much value as possible out of that purge. So if he's already storm striking you and you put up ice barrier, it's a little bit better. So just keep that in mind. Another thing is Temporal Shield. Temporal Shield is incredibly strong this expansion. It's one of the best talents we have in terms of defense. 45-second cooldown, like we talked about. 4-second shield. All the damage you take during that 4 seconds gets healed up to you. Something different about it this expansion is if it gets purged off after 2 seconds, you still get the heal back from that 2-second damage window. You can also cancel it early. So if you temporal, let's see you know a lot of damage is incoming and you temporal shield at like 80% health, but in that 4 seconds you're about to die, you can make a macro to remove the temporal shield. I have it bound to a key. It's just cancel aura. Cancel or temporal shield, so you can use that as well to remove the shield when it's up, so you don't die while it's still up, because that can happen. You can put it up and in that 4 seconds you can die and get no value out of it, or you can cancel the shield and get a big heal back. So another thing to keep in mind. So just a quick recap: using temporal shield well, using ice barrier well, using Kona Cold well, your mobility, so making sure you're run casting when you want to get off damage, creating space from the melee, using your shimmer to get away, making sure you're landing polymorphs. So because of Burning Determination, if you're spam casting Frostbolts and you get interrupt, then you can spam cast polymorphs. So if a warrior's on you and he kicks your frost, you can just poly him, poly him, poly him. Of course, you gotta still be a little bit careful you don't want to get interrupted in frost and die. But yeah, that's basically it for mage defensive gameplay right now. Feral Druid is going full ham on me. Once my shield breaks, then I can use that temporal shield. Now the shield's going to completely protect me. It'll heal me up to full. And then I can create that distance like we were talking about. Using my run cast to the best of my ability, my blink cast. Then hopefully my healer can help me out a little bit. Then once he reconnects, I can actually just do it early against him. Put up the ice barrier. Keep kiting with the Kona Cold. Another Nova. Blink cast away. You have a lot of mobility, so using that mobility as well as your temporal shield and your ice barrier, and then of course if all else fails you can ice block or not, up to you. Next up, we're going to quickly discuss macros and keybinds. Some really important keybinds I feel like every mage should have. Make sure you have a button to focus your target, focus arena 1, focus arena 2, focus arena 3, as well as target arena 1, target arena 2, and target arena 3. You can go find those in your targeting or in your keybinds, targeting, and you can find them right here. Focus arena 1, 2, 3, and target arena 1, 2, 3. So for target arena 1, 2, 3, I have it bound to Alt A, Alt S, Alt D. Focus arena 1, 2, 3 is mouse 5, shift mouse 5, control mouse 5. You can use these however you want, and that'll just help you with some of the macros that I'm going to be suggesting here for you guys in a sec. So some of the macros that I use, focus macros, I have /cast focus polymorph, so focus polymorph, a stop casting focus counterspell, focus spell steal I like a lot. So those are really the only focus macros I have now. I used to have focused frost trial, but that doesn't exist anymore. And yeah, I have a macro for doing damage, so I could probably remove all this. I can remove all these. So it's just /cast icy vein, /use 13, 14, as well as your blood fury. You don't even need to use 13 and 14 anymore. It can just be icy veins as well as blood fury. So that's just so every time you want to ice form, it'll transform your icy veins into ice form, and then you can get your burst off with that macro. Very simple. I have an ice block macro. What the ice block macro does is it makes it so I can spam ice block without coming out. So if I'm in a really sticky situation, I can just spam frostbolt over and over and over. With that macro, it's important to have a macro that you can get out of ice block with. So I use Ebon Bolt just because it's next to my Frostbolt or next to my Ice Block. You can use whatever ability you want, and all you do is put a Cancel Aura Ice Block into it. Like I said, I have an Ebon Bolt, and it's because it's bound to 4. So when I need to Ice Block, I can press 5 and never come out, never come out, never come out. And then when I want to come out, I hit 4. So if I want to quickly get out of Ice Block or block a CC, I just hit 5-4 really quick. And that way I don't accidentally double tap my Ice Block and come out too early. A couple other useful macros. Cancel Aura Temporal Shield. So when you do have that Temporal Shield popped and you think you might die, having a Cancel Aura button for it is really, really nice. You can remove it, and that way you can survive. What else? Oh yes, another little easy macro you can have is an Eat macro. When you're in a group and when you're in a party, when you're by yourself and when you're in a party, your Conjure Refreshment will do different things. If you're by yourself, it'll just summon some food. If you're in a party, it'll summon a table, and you'll get Mana Fritters or Mana Pudding. So having a macro to have them both makes it so you don't have to have 2 separate keybinds, and you'll never not have your food bound. Ice Nova macro is really nice. So when you're bursting someone, you can actually cast Ice Nova on yourself, or yeah, you can cast Ice Nova on yourself. That's really annoying when, like, let's say you're fighting a rogue and you're casting a Frostbolt, and after that Frostbolt you want to Ice Nova them and they actually vanish. If you Frostbolt and then you're spamming Ice Nova and they vanish, you'll actually Ice Nova yourself and you'll get no value out of it. So having a harm for your Ice Nova is really, really nice. That way you can't waste it on yourself. So I recommend that as well. And then a Counterspell Arena 1, 2, 3. This is more advanced macros, kind of. You don't need this. You can get away with just a regular counterspell and a focus counterspell. But I still think it's really, really nice to have available, especially if you're using arena frames, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Having a /cast at Arena 1 counterspell at Arena 2, as well as in Arena 3. And the reason you want this is because normally you can only have a target and a focus, and there's 3 people in the arena, obviously. So if you have your target and you have your focus, and let's say the third person you're not targeting or focusing is casting, you want to be able to interrupt them. So that's also really strong. Quickly talk about pet control as well. For my pet, I have a couple different binds. I have pet attack. So when I want my pet to attack, I can tell him to attack. I have pet move to. That way I can hide my pet if I need to, put him behind a pillar or move him away out of combat. I have a pet follow if I want my pet to just follow me, so he's always available to get those pet novas off. And then obviously I have pet nova and water jet bound as well. Don't really use water jet in arena too often because of how strong freeze is for shattering your frostbolts, but it is nice just in case you need it. And then lastly, just to complete the guide, I wanted to recommend some different add-ons to you guys. Look at the add-ons that I use. A couple different ones. Details, you can see it over here. It's nice to just see damage breakdown, so I'm a very analytical person. It's fun to see how you died, how much damage you're doing. Let's say you play against another Frost Mage and he's doing way more damage than you can see, like, why is he doing more damage? Are his Frostbolts hitting harder? Why is his Frostbolts hitting harder? And you can really start thinking about that. Maybe he's getting off more Ice Lances, maybe he's getting off more Glacial Spikes, and it can just help you improve your own gameplay. It's also nice to just, yeah, see the breakdown of damage. I like looking at it, so I use details. Omnibar, another nice one. It's particularly useful for seeing interrupts, so slash Omnibar. You can put different spells on it as well, so you can scroll through all of these spells. An example, when you're fighting a monk, you can make it so it shows their Touch of Death, so you know when they're going to burst. You can also make it so it shows Touch of Karma. You can scroll through, if you're fighting a Mistweaver monk, put on Life Cocoon, and it'll just give you an idea of when those abilities are up. Another one would be Rogue Cloak of Shadows. It just helps you track defensive cooldowns, so you know when you can burst, find those windows, as well as interrupts. So you can see me testing it right here. It doesn't look this obnoxious when you're actually in an arena because there's not all of these abilities, but you can track Spell Lock, Counterspell, Wind Shear, Ironbark, Pummel, as well as many other abilities that you want, and you can decide which ones are important to you. But this one's particularly useful for interrupting or faking interrupts. It's just nice to know when a Paladin has Rebuke, when a Warrior has Pummel, when a Rogue has Kick. Although you do have Burning Determination, it's still nice to know for those specific situations. Speaking of Burning Determination, another add-on I will show you is called Tell Me When. Tell Me When slash TMW. You can see my Tell Me When bar right here. I used to track a lot of different things with Tell Me When. Now I only track Burning Determination. I put it right here next to my focus frame. And what that does is it allows me to know how long I have a free casting immunity too. There's a couple of different reasons this is important. One, if you're low HP, you don't want to get pummeled on Frost while casting a Frostbolt and then die without blocking. So having that safety net, knowing exactly how long it is, it's a little bit more convenient than looking up in the top right-hand corner of your stream. And I got this idea from Xaryu watching his stream. I thought it was really smart, so credit to him. Twitch.tv/ I think it's Xaryu. I'll put a link to his stream underneath, or Xaryu TV. Very, very good Frost Mage. I got this tip from him, like I said. But yeah, really smart idea. It helps you just know how long you have immunity to cast for, so I highly recommend that. And if you really want to get fancy, you can like show different things like your incanters, how long your ice forms up for, and you can just know how long you have all your burst cooldowns up. I don't use that, but you definitely can if you want. And then lastly, I use an add-on called S Arena. There's a couple of different add-ons that do similar stuff. One is called Gladius, I believe. I like S Arena. It's a little bit more clean. And what S Arena does is it just lets you scale your arena frames. It also has a diminishing return tracker, a cast bar, and a trinket tracker. So you can see when people have trinkets up, you can take advantage of that by swapping to them or making sure you can land full CC chains, as well as the diminishing return. So you know when's the next time you can poly. Is your poly half? Is your poly 1/3? And it's easier to see cast bars. You can move the frames around and you can scale them. So I highly recommend this add-on to anyone, any arena player, but it's also extremely nice for mages in particular. So, yep, those are the add-ons. Not too many add-ons. I know this is a quick guide. I just want to get it done for you guys as fast as possible. I hope you guys really enjoyed it. Hope you have a lot of hope you got a lot of information out of it. If you have any questions, feel free to drop a comment below. If you liked the video and you want to see more like it, feel free to like the video. And as always, guys, I'll see you in my stream. Thanks for watching.